But I would first always recommend first you have to find product market fit, and then you go after message market fit. I think that's the sequence, because I've worked in the past with some early stage companies. Now I can work more with growth stage companies, but I used to work sometimes with early stage. And even getting some of their few customers on interviews was already hard because they didn't have product market fit yet. And so these customers weren't really excited at all or convinced at all on even jumping on customer interviews. And so that's already some friction that you don't want. First, find product market fit and then go after message market fit.
Welcome to Thrivecast. Our today's guest is someone that I've been a fanboy for the last 1 to 2 months now. We've connected a couple of times, and he's educated me a little bit about on how buyers buy these days. So we're going to talk a lot more about the psychology of buying. We're going to touch upon the storytelling aspects, and we have Chris Silvestri with me here today. He's the founder for Conversion Alchemy, where he's helping many B2B SaaS companies really turn their complex products into some clear, compelling messages that convert. He's been at it for some time. So, Chris, welcome to the podcast. How have you been? And could you tell us a little bit about your background as well?
Yeah, hey Guru, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here and to dive into all of this very nerdy and geeky stuff. So a little bit about me. I have a very different background from a lot of marketers. I was a software engineer in industrial automation for 10 years. So imagine automatic assembly machines in factories, and I was basically programming their components. I was also designing a lot of the human machine interfaces, so touchscreen displays that the operator used. And so that gave me a lot of background in terms of usability, very logical, sequential, understanding systems thinking, and also putting myself in other people's shoes and empathizing with them as well as you build these systems. And yeah, then after that, I kind of got a bit tired of the whole kind of industry, and I wanted something more flexible because I'm a drummer and I want to play more with my band. So I started looking for what to do online, how to make money, and I stumbled on copywriting. I got immediately hooked by the psychology behind it, the understanding of decision making processes, and also the craft of writing as well. And so I started studying that, did that for a couple of years on the side, and when jumped in full time. And through a lot of different avenues and experiences, I was also a UX lead for a couple of years with an agency. And in 2021, that's when I founded the Conversion Alchemy, which is kind of my unique blend of conversion copywriting, UX design, and the psychology behind it all. And that's what brings us to today, where I help B2B SaaS companies find their message market fit, as I call it.
Yeah, I think I've seen this now story a couple of times. People who come from a slightly different background have a very open perspective towards it. I used to read and listen to the head of Ogilvy and Ogilvy or Mather. I forgot his name. A UK a British marketing person who had, I think, either dyslexia or his attention span was a lot more smaller. So he built out all these frameworks to be able to understand what people do. And I keep getting some of his things. So compliments on this particular journey.
Yeah, I actually know, I don't know if it's the same guy, but I know that Bob Mesta, which is the
Master, yeah.
one of the ideators of Job to be Done, he's dyslexic,
Josh,
so yeah, he's got a very unique mindset, and I'm a fanboy for him.
yeah.
I'm actually gonna see him in London in November, so I'm pretty excited.
Wonderful, wonderful. Will say hi to me. And I'm a big
Yeah,
fanboy of him.
sure.
So maybe, Chris, we can jump into some of the things that you mentioned. To all the listeners, I think Chris's background is extremely unique. But what I also like about the way he thinks about it is he's not just a writer, he's not just a creator. He is, although he may, I'm not sure about this yet. He may not yet have a degree in psychology, but every conversation that I'm having with him, he brings in the aspects of psychology, aspects of UX, and blending that storytelling aspects on why people buy. So I'm going to have a lot of fun today, and hopefully you can too.
Yeah, yeah,
So
exactly.
let's jump into something. The first thing that you and I we met, Chris. You mentioned about words alone don't convert.
Mm.
You've written about it. You've mentioned that, and I asked you, if words don't convert, do the pictures convert? Do videos convert? And then you say, hey, no, let's go behind the scenes about what actually helps in conversion. So maybe could you unpack what do you mean by words alone will not convert?
Yeah, so the way that I say it is words can copy can convert if it can be found, and what by found I mean what I've discovered by running hundreds, if not maybe thousands over the years of usability tests when I was at the agency. Then we actually turned into a usability testing startup from the agency work, and so I used to watch loads of usability tests. And a lot of product people run usability tests so for product development purposes, right? The way that I was doing was more for conversion optimization purposes. So I was looking at these testers, and for people who are not familiar with usability testing, is basically testers who are close to your target demographic or psychographic, using your website or product and narrating their own experience, telling you what they find useful, what friction they stumble on, what's clear, what's not. You can use those. The way that I used them was for conversion optimization and message testing purposes. So that gave me a lot of insight into how people actually think and what they actually do on websites specifically when they need to first find information, understand whether or not the website is for them, what their first impression is, and how they go about their whole experience. So, how do they navigate what they find is useful for them to clarify their thought process? And so that's what I actually mean by words alone can convert. If you just write copy randomly on a website without paying attention to the visual hierarchy. So, what should be read first, second, how people navigate through different pages, then it's pretty, your copy might not work. Just because you need to kind of first understand what's the flow that you need to maintain through the pages, but also through each specific section. What do people need to read first, second, in order for them to educate them, inform them, and finally persuade them, right? So that's what I actually mean. I call it the UX of copy on website, which is basically visualizing and structuring your copy in a way that the flow actually persuades people rather than just have them do the work of understanding what you mean and kind of making sense of all of it.
So maybe I'm thinking about a buyer journey, right? I think I'm now old enough. I'm 50 years of age, and I've seen maybe a couple of milestones on how people used to think earlier, right? So in maybe the early 2000s, all the selling was top down, right? Your website really did not matter as much. Whatever your sales team would go pitch, whatever the value they could suggest, that's what used to happen. It was all sales led, or maybe a tad bit of marketing led, wherein some of these copies were experimented by selling over email or newsletters or things like that. Fast forward to 2010s, there was a market trend of people visiting your website. More and more websites started coming into play, and newer categories of products started coming into play. So websites were very relevant at that time, but still the selling was not. Selling was still one on one. Selling was still the sales guy would go follow up, do POCs. So the buyer's
Very high
journey was
touch.
very high touch. Fast forward now, maybe 5, 10, 15 years from those days, we have the product led growth momentum coming in. The millennial generation is started to come in. Their attention span is way smaller than, it's a magnitude smaller than probably yours and my attention span. So in these particular trends, let me ask this question: are websites relevant anymore? And
Yeah,
if
I
so, in your mind, what's the buyer journey these days?
I definitely think that they are relevant. I just think that they need to be seen and looked at and optimized with a different lens. And especially now with AI search, which is almost all another topic that we can dive in. But the way that I think, especially about the difference between product led growth and sales led growth with messaging, you could almost say that in product led growth, product is the message, right? So you kind of need to lead with the product, have people experience it, have people also build kind of a sense of competence. They need to feel confident and in control, that they can go through the experience and they can extract value from it. And then message kind of makes them accomplish the last couple of steps and keeps them with their attention. In sales led growth, your message is kind of the product at first, and then with the product you need to match their experience and kind of help them go through that transformation. So with websites, I think especially now, where people land on your website, they already have a conversation going on in their heads. First, before AI, it was a conversation mostly from internal team dynamics, or their own research. Now that research with AI is also a conversation with AI. So they have
Yeah.
two types of conversations going on. And so I think that currently the website is more of like a almost like a confirmation interface in a way. It needs to confirm what they already have, their expectations that they have in their heads. And so you need to do a very good job at being super specific, at matching their thought process, their awareness, their sophistication level, and their needs or struggles, right? So I think definitely still has a valuable purpose, the website, because it needs to, if you can look at it kind of like the executive summary of your business, especially the homepage, right? It needs to kind of give people the brief, and then they can take, I don't know, your jumping off points to learn more or to sign up or to try your product, right? So I think definitely still has a purpose, but you need to look at it slightly different if you want to create good messaging.
So maybe I can definitely see this, that maybe Chris, I found a guy on Reddit some time back, where he would say, hey, give me your website, give me the persona, give me the website URL, give me the persona who you're targeting and the problem you're trying to solve, and pay me $2, and I'll give you the headline message, the hero message. I dropped him a note,
Mm. You insulted him.
after you and I we talked about it. Like, is that good money? And apparently he's done 10,000 such things.
Wow.
You know, uh, 10,000 times two is still $20,000. But that's but I think he's got enough on his.
Did he actually have any results, or like, I mean, you could actually run a pretty good study at least from it.
Probably, I didn't check. I just asked him how many. He said,
Yeah.
in the last 4.5 years, about 10,000 people. He's
Wow.
got a day job. Apparently, this is not a full-time business for him. So I can imagine, what you're doing. It's a hugely scalable business, that most
Mm.
companies would want. So maybe why don't we, segue into maybe the next part of it, where you can maybe walk me through and help even the audience around some of the companies that you worked with. How did you think about the message? Maybe from a theoretical standpoint, maybe even before we jump to that, could you maybe articulate a little bit about how do buyers think these days? What's the research? You mentioned a little bit earlier that they research off your website and have conversations off your
Mm.
website, and then they come to the website. They're almost in the part of consideration phase, right? They are
Yeah.
not they're not the top of the funnel yet. So they are almost a little beyond the top of the funnel. So maybe walk us through the entire buyer journey, what's going on in your head on how you
Yeah.
think about such things, and then we will jump into some examples.
Yeah, sure. So the first thing that I always think about, that I try to uncover in my research, is kind of the trigger, the need. What is the that triggers your ICP to actually at least start considering a new solution? And there's a couple of things that happen there, which is it can be a pain or some kind of friction starts showing up in their world, which is
Hmm.
maybe they don't reach KPIs, a tool that they're using no longer fits their needs, or maybe some kind of process or system breaks inside the company and they need to kind of fix that. Or it can also be what I've seen, some change inside the company. Could be new, like the company gets funded, or some leadership changes, or maybe scaling, introducing new complexity, or there are new targets that they need to reach. Another one, which is slightly less frequent but also super important, I think, is the social proof. So these, I don't know, executives or your ICP in general, maybe hear someone say, "Oh yeah, I switched to this product and it worked really well," And so they start researching, right? So that there's kind of influencer persona as well. And another very subtle one is more of an emotional need, I think, which is the peer. It's kind of like peer pressure, fear of failure. These people actually they start feeling like their job is at risk if they don't do something different, which might be irrational sometimes because maybe things work enough, like fine.
Hmm.
But at the same time, maybe they need to introduce something new, make things fresh, and kind of try always to optimize. And so there's the need that starts coming into play. So what they do, they start searching initially privately, which could be looking at reviews on sites like G2 Crowd, which is a big place where I go mine for reviews. Maybe they just have conversation in Slack or communities on LinkedIn, or they look at ChatGPT. Right? In this case, LLMs, that's where they start shaping those early opinions.
Hmm.
And they basically summarize what you do, what your company does for them, even before they look at your website. So the first impression in this case, you could say that it happens even before people click and land on your website. So they already kind of have a
Yeah.
mental picture. Then what happens when they kind of discover you? There's this conversation going on. So I was listening to a podcast where Forrester Research Group, they started defining the buying committee now for B2B as buying network.
Hmm.
And I like it because basically by buying network, they define it as like the group of your peers, your partners, but also AI. And so the a very good way of seeing it, I think, rather than you being just a vendor selling to this buying network, you should actually join as a partner, helping them make the right decision. And I think that this is a very useful frame because it puts you in a position of first being clear and really helping them go through the entire journey. So I think this is super important. Yeah, as I mentioned, I think the website is more of like a confirmation engine now because they already have this impression coming on. And so the more you can be authoritative and consistent with your messaging, consistency is a huge one as well now with all your channels, because humans as well as AI and LLMs now look very much for consistency across your messaging system and your channels. If even you have an inconsistency in your value propositions or positioning as well, that's when the AI, for example, struggles to capture your messaging and sends out the wrong signals. I was in a community last week and there was someone saying how ChatGPT was capturing their value proposition that was like 2 years outdated,
Yeah.
and they were struggling to have it catch up with the new positioning, the new updated messaging, right? So there's a couple of technique, like very technical stuff that you can do with SEO as well to fix that. But it's a signal, right? If you're not consistent, or if you're not proactive in sending out your message, the AI and also humans won't really capture it. Once they land on your homepage, let's say, this is kind of the next step. So the first
Maybe
impression,
let me pause there.
yeah,
So I think, yeah, I'm just trying to maybe get that in my
mm,
head. I think the first thing that you mentioned is the need or the
yeah,
trigger, and they once they have a need, and you mentioned various signals on why they have the trigger.
yeah. Then
They start searching, they ask
the
AI,
discovery,
all
yeah,
that. So they do the discovery process, and they may or may not find your product. If they find your product, then the likelihood of they trying to go into your website is a lot more higher at that time. If they don't find your
mm,
product, you won't even have a website visit,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
You also mentioned about words like messaging and positioning even before they are
Mm,
coming to your website. Could you maybe elucidate a little bit about what do you mean by the word messaging or positioning? How are they different? And then we can jump into after they come into the journey of landing to the website and further on.
yeah, that's a great question. And it's, I think, one big point of confusion as well for a lot of operators in SaaS. So the way that I see it is like three elements that lead from the strategy to the final copy, the words on the page. The first one is positioning, which is simply your definition of what you do, who you do it for, and how you do it uniquely, better, or differently. Right? Very simple. It's a very clear encapsulation of of where you are and what you do. The messaging, the next stage, is actually how you say all of that through different lenses. Could be what's your narrative strategy, what's your point of view, what's your sales pitch, what are your value propositions, maybe looked at through a lens of a gain, a loss, benefit, different types and variants of that. And also it includes typically your brand voice guidelines. So that's your messaging strategy, how you say your positioning. And then the copy is the translation of that strategy into the actual words on the page or on different assets, right? So these are the three elements.
Got it, got it. Maybe could you give an example so that it's clear on, on
Yeah,
what you mean?
yeah. So for example, a client that I work for, Moz SEO, so their positioning before used to be all in one SEO tool, and we're talking about specifically their Moz Pro product, because they had different products. They were positioning themselves as the only one SEO tool, right? And now it's packed with only one SEO tools. So a lot of the work that we've done was first understanding, okay, what did their customers appreciate and what they can do best to help these customers that actually are best fit buyers. And so we decided to change the positioning from only one SEO tools to kind of the simplest SEO tool out there, just because we noticed that their customers weren't power users, but actually operators who just needed to get their SEO work done. So that was their positioning. And then from that positioning, we created a messaging framework that basically elaborated on that specific positioning and expanded into all value propositions, right? So for the product page, we have a couple of value propositions that go into all the features. So for each feature, we
Mhm.
use that positioning of simple product. How is this feature seen, and how do we write copy for this in the lens of this is a simple product? And the copy, again, it's kind of the elaboration, the translation of that messaging strategy. For example, in the messaging strategy, we also had the sales pitch version, right? So that turned that positioning into the narrative of a sales pitch, starting from what's their unique insight. A lot of tools out there are not simple enough. This is what our customers try. They try all these different tools and they introduce complexities. And then what do we do differently? This is how we do it, and this is are the features. This is the proof. So that's an example of sales pitch derived from the messaging strategy. And yeah, we worked on the copy specifically for the product page, which basically turned all that strategy into a simple, clear message on one page. And we did the same for Mouse API as well, which add another kind of product. But yeah, this is pretty much the process. I jump typically on a workshop, so positioning is very collaborative, should be
Mhm.
done with your team, so product, sales, founder, marketing, support, so that everyone is aligned on that decision. And then I typically turned all of the discussions and flesh it out into a messaging strategy, and then we write the copy.
Got it, got it. So I think, the framework that you had is, in this case, start off with the positioning. It really comes, from a collaboration across the entire team. Then you build out, what's the core messaging for that particular persona, and the features and all of that will take
Hmm.
your positioning framework. In the case of Moz Pro, you mentioned about the simple SEO, and you're highlighting the word simple, in various features. Simple this, simple that, simple this, simple that, right? So that's okay. Now I understand what you mean by consistent. So if
Mm,
you're using the word simple SEO, you're using the word,
exactly.
the same term across the board, and that's the consistency
Yeah.
part of it.
And so, for example, those two products, Moz Pro and Moz API, how do you keep consistent? But talking about two different products. So for Moz Pro, we had simple way of optimizing for SEO. With Moz API, we had a simple way of using Moz data, which also had the element of trust. So the core, the simplicity stays, but it's basically spread and customized and tailored for different products.
Got it. Okay, so maybe let's continue on the story that you were mentioning. Once you have the need, the triggers, the positioning, and the
Yeah.
messaging, somebody is now coming to your website. What happens then? What are
Yeah.
they
So.
thinking typically in their mind? And let me ask a few questions, around that.
Mhm.
We had a panel discussion last week, and there was a massive debate about how many touch points, is the average number of touch points it takes, from the first time they encounter your brand,
Mm.
do the time they can do make a decision to consider, and then click on either a schedule a demo, or sign up, right?
Yeah.
And the numbers were, all over the place, right? One of the VCs was mentioning that his portfolio sees somewhere between 56 to 78 touch points uh, for B2B, SaaS companies, which is why the tactics that they use is get as many touch points as possible in a span of 3 weeks time. If not, it just
Yeah.
prolongs the journey.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it's crazy if you think about it, especially when it comes to sales-led growth. I work with a company that their sales cycle was 11 months, and we kind of optimized it to, I don't know, 4 or 5 around that. Like, imagine through 11 months how many touch points people can go through, right? And how many people in the buying committee. So it's not only one
Yeah.
persona, it's
Correct.
multiple as well.
Correct. Yeah. So maybe to continue the story of the website in that particular
Yeah.
frame, that the buyer is coming in and he or she is thinking about solving their problems, and now they're landing on the website. What is it that they're
Mm.
looking for? And you're famously known for building emotional and psychology frameworks being attached to it. So what is it that the buyer is looking for? Which words, which terms, what things can trigger them to feel happy about, say, yes, I think I like this product? What is it that
Yeah.
you've seen there?
Yeah, so there's a particular sequence that I like to think about, and I've learned this like studying conversion optimization tactic and strategies. So it's a lot of copywriting, but also a lot of CRO as well. And
Hmm.
one big mistake that a lot of companies make is that the first thing that they do with their value proposition in their hero section, let's say above the fold section, is that they basically just start promoting what they do, who they are, right? Well,
Hmm.
we are like a project management platform, or we have these badges and all of that. When, as we mentioned and we talked about, with all these touch points, with all these little conversations that people have before landing on their homepage, the first thing that you should actually do is try to match that conversation that they already have. So first you have to discover what the conversation is, which is a lot of research, and then you have to match it with the right words. So I always like to think that when they land on your page, in the first 10 seconds, could be even less, just because through design, through absorbing your words, people can understand very quickly now. They have to answer two questions. So the first one is, do I understand this? Is it clear? That's the first one, and that's why clarity is so important. And the second one is this for me specifically? So those are the first two questions that I would always try to answer for them. And that's why, as I said, match that conversation. This is the conversation that's going on. And you need to match that motivation, what brings them there exactly. And in this case, I always like also to kind of add the nuance that it can be pain that they are kind of moving away from, because that works really well to convert them. But it can also be a desired outcome. So there's two emotional direction. Could be running away from pain or moving towards an outcome. So you need to
Mm,
find which one is the most prominent. And
yeah.
I always
The
like to,
frustration or the yeah.
yeah, I find it out through basically running interviews or even looking at reviews. In G2, I think there's when they ask questions and people reply in the reviews, there's a question that basically says like, what did you find most valuable or something like that. And a lot of times people start that answer with I wanted to or I needed to. And in that kind of language you can understand whether they use more of like a pain related language or more desired outcome focused language.
Got it.
And so that's the step where I start from. In this case, if you think,
Okay.
and in this case, with those two questions, you can think of it in terms of system one and system two thinking. So if people are familiar, from Daniel Kahneman, I think there was research about system one is the kind of the lizard brain, faster, reactive, and then system two is a slower, logical system. System one is kind of the first that comes into play, that start filtering for that clarity. Do I understand this? But it also needs relevance. Is this for me? And also needs to feel kind of safe, like this is the right place, I'm not wasting time. So they need to feel that it's professional, that's clear, that's relevant for them. And then system two, that's the more logical, slower one, is the one that kind of says, okay, I'm in the right place. Now I can start reading and starts absorbing all of the copy and kind of, and
Got it.
that's your first win. If you can satisfy that first 10 seconds, they you're already in a pretty good spot. And then I like to think of the rest in terms of what I say is like we don't really sell a product, especially on the homepage. We sell a decision. And as for decision, what I mean is it's not really only about your call to action, which can be sign up for a demo or the trial or whatever is your primary call to action. I like to think in this specific section, the above the fold, what's the next decision that we need to sell people on? And that to me is a series of micro yeses that you need to answer for people. So they are asking all these questions inside their heads, which is the first one is this the right place? Do I understand it? Is this relevant for me? Then after that comes, is this valuable? Is this credible for me? Like, do I believe them? Do I believe that I can do it as well? Is this safe then to act and click on this button? What happens next? Those are all kind of still emotional. And then after as well, even after they click, whether they land on another page, a use case page, persona page, or on your pricing page, that's also super important because you need to confirm to them that they accomplished so that they've taken the right decision and this is the right place for them. So that's an area that a lot of people don't really pay attention to. Coming from a UX background, I saw how many times expectations are not matched between the marketing side of things and product. And that's why a lot of times you have a lot of churn because maybe marketing sets the wrong expectations and then inside the product you see a totally different thing. And so the before and after, that expectation matching and set is super important. And yeah, so this is kind of a big lump of different kind of things that happen inside the heads of people and the first experiences they go through.
Maybe a very trivial question from my side. I mean, and that's a very uh, I know it's a very interesting framework, but a very trivial question. Have you seen more and more products focus on the frustration language, meaning, hey, you're frustrated with something like this, try our product? Or is it more of a giving language in that, hey,
Mm.
we solve the world's hunger problem?
Yeah, unfortunately, I think it's more of like on the frustration side, especially because there's a lot more competition now. So even, for example, naming competitors works really well now, and that's why there's a lot of competitor pages popping up that also help again with AI search as well. So even if you don't need to bash your competitors, but if you say this company does this well for these people, we do this better for these other people,
Right.
right? So I
Okay.
think definitely frustration plays a big part now in decision making.
Got it. Makes sense. Makes sense. Tell me a little bit about friction. I think you mentioned a lot about the psychology aspects of it. The decision making, the micro yeses, and all of that.
Mm.
But where do you see friction? Even if some of this is there, why do buyers not click on schedule a demo or sign up and try? And
Yeah.
I hear this a lot, right? So we work with a lot of early stage startups at this moment, so they're getting a lot of traffic to the website, but the conversion to schedule a demo or sign up or talk
Mm.
to us is less than 0.03%,
Yeah.
average, for anyone who's less than $1 million of revenue. So if you go
Hmm.
slightly bigger, you're a lot more popular. Maybe the social trust factors will heed into
Yeah.
it, and then the conversion rate increases. But what's the friction that you see that you'd recommend early stage startups, or maybe even someone between 1 to 20, 25 million ARR companies to get
Mm.
over it, away from just counting the number of visitors to that conversion optimization of how much you can convert?
Yeah. So there's I think two sides. The first, like the messaging copy side, which is again through understanding your audience and understanding how you need to message to them. You need to be clear first over being clever, but also a lot of companies, I think, mistake being clear with simplifying their messaging. So, and they end up kind of dumbing down their messaging, which doesn't really speak to their ICPs the way that it should. Because when you clarify, you kind of make, even if the message is complex, you make it understandable for the right people because you use the right words, you match them at the awareness level where they're at, and so that works much better. That also helps with the cognitive load, cognitive friction, right? So if the message is clearer, they don't have less work to do. And in that case, I want to mention a book that I'm a big fan of. It's not very known. It's called The User Illusion, and it talks basically about consciousness in general, but also talks about how much people need to kind of work to unpack the meaning from the words that you use in communication. And it's a very good perspective on, yeah, actually people need to work to understand what you say. It's not that they just absorb your words and understand immediately, right? So that's it's a very good lens, I think. And the other one, from a UX side perspective, what I'm seeing and what I used to see in user testing as well, is that the decision fatigue kind of increases the less clear you are with the paths that you establish. So from the homepage, first, how many or and what ICPs are you targeting? And what paths to your primary call to action do you give them to follow? Maybe your primary ICP can just go to your sign up or demo page or pricing page, and that's done. But a secondary ICP, maybe your influencer, first needs to get some more information, be educated a bit more, and then they can go on the pricing page and maybe sign up on their own. So it's finding the paths for the right ICPs and also the right calls to action. So a lot of companies first, even in the design, they blast call to action buttons all over the place, same color, indistinguishable one from the other.
Hmm.
And the best thing that works there is having at least differentiation between the primary call to action, which is the sign up for demo or check pricing or book a demo or contact sales, and the secondary call to action, which could be go and look at the use case pages or the case studies. Have that this differentiation, and together with the right path, I think that really helps with the UX, with the conversion optimization. And yeah, I think this is like pretty much the way that I think about. But again, it's all about understanding your audience, your ICPs, and then planning the right path for them through the journey.
Got it. Let me, and I know we'll be out of time very soon, but maybe a couple of quick fire questions on this one. Have you seen anything really bad websites that you kind of abhor even for the first time that you look at it?
Mm.
You may not be interested to go any further. Any examples that you've seen?
Well, there's a lot of bad copy that really doesn't make you want to go any further. But apart from that, a lot of times, like from a UX standpoint, there's a lot of elements that seem clickable are not clickable, so people get frustrated and rage click all over the place. And it happens a lot, I think, with a very important element that helps with conversion, which is the when you, for example, you have a especially sales led or maybe in your onboarding, you have a somehow complex onboarding process. So maybe you need to set things up, and so there's a couple of steps, at least 2-3 steps. So it's very useful to have on the homepage or on a how it works page your 2-3 step of how it works. Literally, the heading could be how it works, and then you present how it works. A lot of times companies make those different steps clickable, so people try to click on each of the steps to go deeper, but it's not clickable, and so they get frustrated and leave, right? Because they need to set their expectations in their heads of how exactly it works before investing time, especially if it's a complex onboarding and a complex process to get started, and they have high switching costs because they've already using another product for the same needs.
One more question. If one of your clients is in a blue ocean market,
Mm.
meaning there's not many competitors, you can go ahead and solve it and the world is going to be yours. How many do you think are in like that? Or do you see almost every category is taken, all of the people that you
Mm.
work with, all of the companies that you work with are always in the red ocean? I'm going to eat your share of the market rather than create a new one.
Yeah, I mean, the majority now, it's very hard to be in a blue ocean. But what I'm seeing is you can be in a red ocean, but if you have your product doesn't need to be completely different. In fact, when we work on positioning, what I always recommend people and when we work on in our positioning workshop is let's find the 3 to 4 differentiated things that you do that are kind of slightly unique, at least for how you do them. But it's not that each one needs to be completely unique. What makes you unique is the combination of all of those. Like, you are the only one that does all 3 or 4 together at the same time. And so that also helps with messaging, because then you don't need to be like the only company that does this. But also, a good differentiation factor, I think, is your point of view. So if you have a very strong point of view and specific insights on why you're doing what you're doing. So if you build this product, what's the reason? What do you see that other companies don't see in the market, on what your customers are doing wrong, what your competitors are doing wrong, that actually pushed you to build this product? If you have a very strong point of view, that can be a very good differentiator that actually makes it almost feel like you're in a blue ocean market, even if you are in a red ocean market.
Got it. Got it. That's very helpful. One last question. Any recommendations to startups? When should they think about messaging, positioning? I'm sure the answer is always. When should they actually spend the time, the energy, the money towards making it work? I mean,
Yeah.
the 6 7 situation is usually, I'm building the product. Should I go build the product first, and then the messaging, or the messaging, the positioning, the website copy comes before the product? What's your recommendation? How
Yeah.
much should they spend towards it?
I would say you need some kind of messaging to start, and also like at least a broad understanding of your personas. But at this stage, I would define them as early customer personas, not your ideal customer personas. So, for example, instead of your personas being the CMO or the IT person or the CFO, maybe you define, I don't know, a business buyer and a technical buyer, if you see those two buckets. So bigger buckets that still help you write messaging, at least for them, like an MVP messaging. But I would first always recommend, first you have to find product market fit, and then you go after
And then,
message market fit. I think that's the sequence, because I've worked in the past with some early stage companies. Now I can work more with growth stage companies, but I used to work sometimes with early stage. And even getting some of their few customers on interviews was already hard, because they didn't have product market fit yet. And so these customers weren't really excited at all,
got it.
or convinced at all, on even jumping on customer interviews. And so that's already some friction that you don't want. First, find product market fit, and then go after message market fit.
Super, super, Chris. So thank you so much for your time. If the audience wants to reach out to you, do you have any contacts that you want to leave here, and we can surface it out into our Spotify and Substack notes as well?
Yeah, so people can find me on my website, conversionalchemy.net, where I have a newsletter, a weekly newsletter. They can sign up, all about messaging, research, and also I'm on LinkedIn, so feel free to connect. I'd love to have a chat.
By the way, to the listeners, the watchers of this particular podcast, you'll actually see that in the show notes, below. Again, thank you so much for your time. I learned a lot from this conversation, and hopefully your audience loved it too. I appreciate it. We should do this sometime later again. Let me hit back with you on what the potential ideas that we can come up with. Again, thanks for your time.
Yeah,
I'm going to stop the recording now.
sounds good. Thank you so much, Guru.